semi-sweet chocolate chips. I'm going to add 1 can of sweetened condensed milk. Now this you find in the baking aisle beside the evaporated milk. Now make sure that you get sweetened condensed milk and not evaporated milk. Two very, very different items. So we want to get all that delicious evaporated milk out of here. I love brownies. I love warm brownies especially. What we're going to do is over like a medium heat, this will go very quickly, we are going to melt that chocolate in with the, let me move that pan there, in with the sweetened condensed milk. And see, that's already almost melted, the chocolate chips are. You don't want to walk away from this because we're not using a double boiler here. We are just using the heat of the stove. Now, when that is melted, or almost melted, as you can see, it's very, very gooey and liquidy. So good. We want to drop in 2 cups of butter. We're going to melt that butter right into the chocolate. Just put all that in there. I'll go ahead and kind of cut my butter up. And I prefer unsalted butter. And I use real butter. I don't like the margarine. And really in baking, you don't want to use margarine. You want to use butter. Reason is margarine has a very high water content, and it will totally change the structure as well as the flavor of your butter. I just prefer butter. What I do is when it's on sale, I buy it up, and then I put it in the freezer, and it'll keep, for months, like 6 or 8 months in your freezer, and then when you need it, just take out a package of it. I have butter in my freezer pretty much at all times because I just like butter. Just do. All kinds. But now I normally do buy unsalted butter. So that's going beautifully. I'm going to let that, looks so good. I have a couple of cups of, I'm using dark brown sugar because that's what I had today. But if you have light brown sugar, that's fine too. Dark brown sugar just has a little bit more molasses in it. And it's a little bit of a deeper flavor, but you can use either one. I just did not have any light brown sugar, and they are interchangeable in most recipes. The flavor's a little different, but it doesn't matter. So I'm just using dark brown. Okay, that butter is almost melted, so I'm going to turn the heat off. And I'm going to bring it up here, and I'm actually going to stir in, while it's still warm, the sugar, the brown sugar. Get that over here. This is not a non-stick pan. This is one of those hard anodized pots. I love these things. The only non-stick cookware, and I get asked this a lot, I like a non-stick skillet for some things. But for everything else, I like either just regular stainless steel or the hard anodized. Put that there for a minute. I'm going to actually switch to a whisk. And again, this is not nonstick, so I can use a metal whisk in here. And I'm going to whisk that together. See, it's just all melting together. Now these are gooey brownies. These are meant to be soft and gooey, and they're delicious served with some vanilla ice cream or on their own. And honestly, is there any dessert? Very few desserts. I don't know. I don't know. A warm brownie from the oven. I don't know of very many things that taste better than that. I am going to add a little bit of vanilla, about a teaspoon or 2. however much that you want. I love vanilla. If you ever find Mexican vanilla, try that too. Oh, it's really good. Now, I have 2 eggs here. I'm actually just going to crack them in this bowl. I like to kind of beat my eggs a little bit with a fork before I add it to that. You want to make sure that cools just a little bit. You can temper your eggs if you want to. You don't want to put that in the hot. If you do, you're going to have scrambled eggs, and you don't want that. Get that off of there. I'm going to switch back to my whisk. A good way, or my spatula, a good way to incorporate that into the chocolate without scrambling your eggs or any hot liquid. This goes for anything that you are going to be adding eggs to. Take a little bit of the hot mixture, just a little bit, and put that in with the egg, and that kind of tempers the eggs a little bit to where they don't scramble. And then you can stir your egg in with your other mixture. Get all that out of there. Ooh, so good. Stir that together. And then here I have 2 cups of all-purpose flour. I'm going to add my chocolate, sugar, deliciousness to my flour. Stir that together. I have about a teaspoon of salt in that flour mixture. And this is one you just need your muscles. You just want to incorporate all that flour. And I have a pan that I have sprayed with non-stick cooking spray. I'm going to add some nuts to mine because I like nuts in my brownies. If you don't like nuts in the brownies, you don't have to add any. I'm adding about 3/4 of a cup of just chopped pecans. You only want to stir this until you really don't have any raw flour. Don't overmix it because then you're going to have tough brownies. All right, that's it. We're going to pour this into our baking dish, 350 degrees for about 35 to 40 minutes, and then you take that out of the oven. And you just spread it out. It's okay if you have just a couple of little specks of raw flour. That's perfectly fine. Grab a little knife here. I'm just going to pop this in the oven, clean my bowl, get my bowls in the sink. When I come back, we're going to get started on the soup and the monkey bread. I'm just going to pop that in the oven uncovered for about 30 minutes or so, and I'll show you how to check it. I'll be back in just a minute. Alrighty, now our brownies are in the oven and we're going to get started on our cheeseburger soup. In this pot, I have a pound of just lean ground beef that I'm going to be browning up. Just got that over medium-high heat. Just want to brown it. Now, I am using leaner beef here because I don't want to drain out the grease and all that stuff. I want a little bit of fat, but not too much. Where'd my... don't know where my spoon rests went. Oh, well, just put it right there. And I'm going to use my little handy dandy when that starts browning up a little more. This is just a ground beef messer-upper. I don't really know the technical name for this, but this is just a beef crumbler. You put it in there as you're cooking. You know how sometimes if you don't separate it out real good, it stays in a clump? This separates the little individual things. But I'm going to let it go just a second. Now, I have here just a couple of onions, little smaller onions. So I'm going to, I don't know, I'll see how much this ends up being. I like to cut them in half to give yourself a flat surface to work on. I'm using little cooking yellow onions. You can use a white onion if you want, or a Vidalia, or whatever you want. You could even use a red onion. If you don't have onion, you could use onion powder or granulated onion, but onions should be a staple for you. And I want to cut it into like medium, smallish dice. Sharp knife, big cutting board, very important. There's 1,001 different ways of how to cut up an onion. I'm going to go ahead and put the onion in there because that's very lean as that's browning. So I'm not going to be draining the liquid. If you're using a fattier cut where you're actually going to be draining the fat, then don't put your onion in until you're done. I'm going to use both of these, because you don't want to lose that flavor from the onion. I cut it in half. I cut the top and the bottom, then cut it in half. Peel off that very outer layer of the onion. You can compost that if you compost. I don't, but you can. I like to work on a flat surface. It's safer. And then cut your onion into smaller pieces. Onion and celery are the basis of a lot of soups. Okay, my little bench scraper, great little tool, perfect little tool to have in the kitchen. I have so many people ask me about that. Okay, I'm going to stir those onions in, and now's where you want to get in there with this little thing and just twist it in there, push it down in the beef, and it really does separate that beef into smaller pieces. Okay, let me turn that up just a little bit. Okay, let that brown. Then I'm going to cut up my celery. I really like celery, so I'm going to put the equivalent of probably 2 stalks, because these are smaller. I don't want the leaves in this particular recipe. Just cut up your celery into bite-sized pieces. Celery is actually one of my favorite vegetables. I think it's one of those you either really love it or you really hate it, but I really love it. Fingers bent back, and just cut it into about the same size as the onion. This is a cheeseburger soup that's really, really good. Add that to your pot. That's why I like to work beside my stove. Then you just add as you go. Beef, brown that, break that up, that's about good. Let that cook away for just a few minutes. So while that's browning, let's get started on our biscuits. I have my bottom oven preheated to 375 degrees. We're just going to use canned biscuits. So easy. I need to melt my butter.